Okay, hello everybody. Today we're here with Rose, and we're going to have our first quick little look at Aquanauts. I'd just like to say that this isn't a final representation of the game. I will be flashing up images right now of some of the artwork for the board, as well as the player boards.
Yeah, this is the very rough prototype, in no way representative of the final game.
No way. This
yes.
is very, very rough.
This is the design was Beautiful Handicraft, which is a very nicely produced prototype, but Marco Luna, our talented illustrator, can definitely do better. Okay, so to begin with, each player is going to take a player board, and in the center of the table, you're going to put the research facility and construction board, and then you're going to place the dock by the construction board and the submarine by the research base. Now, each player is going to take their player pieces. So, we have 2 robots, an aquanaut, and 2 player markers. Each player is then going to take their starting resources, which are determined by player order. So, starting player will get 2 power tokens. Second player is going to get a power token and a grey token. And then the final player is going to get a power token and a building material token. Then we need to finish setting up the central board. Separating out any 4 player tiles, we're going to shuffle these and then deal them out onto the building spaces on the construction board. Okay, then we shuffle the research paper deck, deal 4 of them face up to the research board at the top and place the empty spaces. Alright, and then we're going to deal out the public objectives. So these are shuffled, 3 placed faced up where all players can see them. Then you can remove the rest of these cards from the game because they won't be needed again. And that's setup. Once you've got all the resources out to the side, you're now ready to play. So, the objective in Aquanauts is to make the greatest contribution to your field, marine biology, become the most well-known scientist, basically. So you're going to be attempting to accumulate contribution points, which you'll do by publishing scientific papers, researching things in your personal lab if you build one, working together, and also by achieving public objectives like becoming the player with the most cutting-edge facilities. Aquanauts is a worker placement game. So each turn you're going to be placing your 2 robots and your aquanaut, if you choose to pay for them, in different places on the facility in order to generate resources and construct your personal facilities, and also take samples back to the surface for analysis, earning you scientific papers. The game will end when one player has 4 scientific papers, at which point you'll count up how many contribution points everyone has. Round structure. Each player is going to take it in turns to place their robots and aquanauts until every player is out of workers. On your turn, take a worker, in this case a robot, and place it on one of the blue spaces on the central board. Each space can only hold 1 worker at a time. Once your worker has been placed, robot or aquanaut, it will stay there until the end of the round, at which point everyone's robots and aquanauts come home. So, when it's placed on a space, you pay the cost at the bottom of the space, if there is any, and then you take the resources shown at the top. So, in this case, you get 2 power resources. Every person's store has a limit of 10 unless they choose to expand it. A quick guide to the resources in this game. We have power, yellow, oxygen, silver, algae, green, samples, red, and building materials in blue. You also have your contribution points here in pink. So, as you go through your game, you're going to want to accumulate samples, most importantly to publish your research papers, but oxygen, algae, power, and building materials will also come in handy during different points of the game. In the research area, if 2 workers go to adjoining facilities, then each player will also get the resource shown in the node in the center of the facilities. So in this case, each worker would get 1 sample. If it was 2 red workers, each worker would still get the bonus, meaning the red player would get 2 samples as a bonus, as well as the samples from the tiles themselves. The third worker to a cluster will not get a bonus, even though the other 2 spaces are occupied. For example, if yellow's Aquanaut went to the explore space, they would only get 1 red and not get the bonus. You'll notice 3 spaces, 2 gardens and the explore space are Aquanaut only. This means that in order to access these spaces, you'll have had to pay to access your Aquanaut at the beginning of the round. More on that later. Construction facility. If you want to improve your personal facilities, you can choose to place your worker on the construction facility instead. So for example, with a green and a blue in their store, yellow can purchase one of the buildings that costs green or blue on the construction facility. Okay. So you pay the cost shown on the space which you place the worker on, and then take the building and place it into your grid, making sure you do not rotate it. So you can place the building anywhere in your grid, but players who connect up one of these nodes on the outside of your grid to the central grid at the top here will also get that node produced at the end of the round. At the beginning of every round, all your buildings are going to produce, unless you choose not to. So for example, having placed the geothermal pumps, no matter where it's placed in my grid, I will then produce 1 power every round. If I succeeded in connecting up this oxygen node at the bottom, using another building here to the grid, then I would also get a free oxygen at the beginning of every round. The dock and submarine. Also on the research board, launch and load spaces that you can use during your turn. On your turn, you can go to those spaces. Unlike the rest of the spaces on the board, launch and load spaces can hold any number of workers. When you place a robot or Aquanaut on the load space, you can choose to either load the dock or load the submarine. If you choose to load the dock, place 2 building materials and one of your player markers into the dock. So these materials won't be collected until the submarine is activated, but once it is, they'll return to you and you're then free to use them to produce buildings. The other option, if you choose not to load into the dock, would be to load for a research paper. White is going to go on the launch space, place the 4 samples that they need to earn that jellyfish research paper up there into a submarine bay, and place one of their markers as well. Again, this won't unload until the submarine is launched, but when it does, they will be able to claim a research paper. Submarine mechanics. The submarine launches either when the dock is full, the submarine is full, or a player chooses to use the launch space. Whichever player is responsible for triggering the submarine's launch, which order to unload the submarine in. It's possible that someone else might just make it to that new discovery before you do. When the submarine launches, it goes up to the surface and first unloads all of the bays. When you unload each bay, place all the resources from that bay back in the supply and take any paper that corresponds with those resources. This then goes face down on your player board. Each submarine bay can only be used to earn 1 research paper. You can have more than 1 bay on the submarine full. If you cannot get any research papers, for example, if someone else has beaten you to the one you wanted, you can trade in 3 resources of any type except power and building materials. They've got enough of those on the surface to get 3 contribution points. This can only be done once per bay. Once the submarine is unloaded, anything in the dock then comes back down and is given to the player whose marker it's associated with. The player markers, as soon as those are used, go back to the player that owns them. Research papers. To give you a bit of a closer look at a research paper, each one has a requirement. This one, it requires 3 samples and 1 algae. It has a contribution point score, in this case 6. There are 4 sets in the game of types of species that you're researching. In the final game, we'll have all sorts, from corals to sharks to anglerfish. The suit of the cards is going to matter when we get to the public objectives. Public objectives are awarded to whichever player meets the requirements first. When you reach the requirement shown on a public objective, take that public objective and place it face down next to your board. This public objective requires someone to have 5 buildings in their personal grid, whereas this one requires them to publish 2 papers about squid. Then you'll collect the 5 contribution points shown on the card, placing it into your contribution point area, and then place it face down so no one else can get that public objective.
Where are we going to next, Rose?
We are going to do the end of round tidy up and production round.
Okay.
So, at the end of the round, all your workers are taken off their spaces and replaced in their slots.
Put that to their slots.
Yep, so the robots are going to go back here, and the Aquanauts are going to go back to the living pod, ready for the next round. At the start of the round, all the buildings in your grid produce, including any nodes which you have successfully connected up to your grid using the connections on the building tiles. So, for example, in the yellow player's grid, they now have a storage unit, which connects up this yellow, and it connects up the geothermal pumps with the oxygen. So, come the start of the next round, they are going to get 1 power from the geothermal pumps, 1 power from this node, and 1 oxygen from this node.
Cool.
These 2 nodes are not yet connected, so they won't get anything from that. Connecting up your grid more efficiently will net you better resources at the start of the round. As well as running your grid at the start of the round, you decide whether or not to pay for your Aquanaut this round. Human exploration is costly compared to robots, but it's a lot more flexible. There are some spaces that you can only go using an Aquanaut. If you choose to use your Aquanaut this round, you pay 1 oxygen and 1 algae, and then you move them to the worker slots.
Okay.
This means that at any point during this round on your turn, you can choose to use your Aquanaut storage limits. So, at the start of the game, you have 10 storage spaces, not including contribution points for resources. If you, at the end of your turn or your production period, find you have more than 10 resources, you choose which ones to remove. When you remove resources, you recycle them by placing them into the stockpile. The stockpile can be accessed by other players during their turn by placing a worker on it, at which point they collect all the collected resources, and the first player token passes them for the next round. At the beginning of each round, you also add 1 power to the stockpile. Storage can be increased by using a storage facility in your grid. This increases your storage by 5. Research papers are replaced as soon as the submarine has come back down to the bottom. Buildings are only replaced at the start of each round. The building to the furthest left shuffles off, and all other buildings shuffle down so that all spaces are filled. Any open spaces are filled from the building deck. This means buildings change in price as the game goes on, and different buildings will become available. So you can buy that building now or wait and hope nobody else takes it. End of the game. Once someone reaches 4 scientific papers, it is now the end of the game. You finish that round and then count up the total points on scientific papers and all the contribution points in your store. The player with the most contribution points overall is the winner. So that's Aquanauts. Build your personal laboratories, research new samples, and take them all to the surface in order to become the best marine biologist the world has ever seen.
Yeah, so that was how to play Aquanauts. We hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was quite basic, but we're going to be doing like a full how to play as well when we get like a full production copy of the game.
Loads of great art coming soon, so keep an eye on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to see more of the finished product, which looks so much better than
It looks so much better than this. So yeah, like I said, I'll flash up loads of like images of current artwork that we've got like in development. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys.
Thanks, bye!
Bye.